All right, hold on. This slide and the next one, this is a lot of information I'm going to give you. And you need to know this stuff because this is how the United States gets involved. I would recommend listening to it. Just listen to it the first time. Then go back, listen to it again. That's when you get your paper out and your pencil or pen and you begin writing notes because this is a lot of information. So here we go. Up to this point, the United States really felt no direct threat from either Germany or Japan. All the stuff was going on. We didn't feel directly threatened. Our friends in Europe, mostly England and France, they were under tremendous threat, though, from the Nazis. We wanted to help them, but listen, we didn't feel the need to go to war if we hadn't been directly attacked. So in order to help out our allies, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president, he offered several different options. Now, number one, the U.S. was going to provide England weapons that they needed in order to fight Germany. This was provided in a deal that was called cash and carry. England would pay for these weapons, and then England, would be responsible to carry them from the United States back to England. Now, this gave us a bit of distance, and we would not expose our ships or our soldiers to the possibility of being hit by German submarines on the trip across the Atlantic Ocean. So that's the cash and carry plan. This other program, also called the Destroyer for Bases deal, this one allowed the United States to give England U.S.-made ships in exchange for land that the British Empire had, because we wanted to build military bases across the world. Now, the right to build these bases included areas in Newfoundland, Bermuda, and the islands of the Caribbean. So that's called the Destroyers for Bases. We give them ships, they give us land that we can build bases. Now, later on, there's this other program called the Lend-Lease Act, and this one was passed. Now, England was really hurting for money, and they couldn't afford to buy military equipment from us anymore. So this new act, the Lend-Lease Act, allowed the United States to send Britain the equipment they needed. We would, quote unquote, lend it to them, and then Britain promised to return it or to pay rent back to us after the war was over. That's the Lend-Lease Act. Now, while this was all happening in Europe, our help was also needed in Asia. What was going on there to stop the advance of the Japanese military, because like we said, they were beginning to spread out. What you need to understand is that Great Britain had this empire that was huge, guys. It was absolutely massive, and their empire really reached across the globe. Now, some of Britain's most prized territory was in Southeast Asia, particularly in the Philippines. Now, Great Britain began taking some of the warships that they had in the Philippines away from this territory because they were replacing the ships that they had lost fighting the Germans. Now, essentially, they were trying to defend much of their territory across the globe while trying to fight the Germans in their own homeland. This left the British-controlled Philippines very vulnerable to attack from the Japanese military, and the United States attempted to slow down the Japanese military by passing what was called the Export Control Act. Now, Japan depended on the United States for many, many key elements that they needed in order to keep their military going. Now, specifically, they needed scrap iron, they needed steel, and most importantly, they needed oil. It's important to realize that at this time, don't forget this one because this is huge. It's important to realize that Japan purchased 80% of all their oil from us, from the United States. Now, the importance of that is without oil and gas, the Japanese military essentially would be frozen. And so the president basically said, yeah, we're not sending you any more gas. No more fuel that you need to run your military. Now, in response to the Export Control Act, Japanese responded by signing an alliance with Germany, and they became our enemies. All right, so there we go. America tries to help their friends, mostly the British, and we want to avoid fighting. So there we go. On to the next slide.